I spent 12 years in the Forest Service. Most of that time was spent in the high-altitude basins of the Cascades, places where the air is so thin it feels sharp, and the tourists are too smart to venture. You expect to find things out there. You expect a bear encounter, a fall from a ridge, or a hiker who simply didn't respect the weather. But you don't expect the silence. I was responding to a silent ping. It's a low-frequency emergency beacon that only triggers when a device is crushed or compromised. The coordinates led me to a valley near a lake that doesn't appear on the standard USGS maps. The locals call it the Glass because the water never ripples, not even in a storm. I found the campsite at 1400 hours, 2 tents, high-end North Face gear, still staked perfectly into the permafrost. But as I got closer, my jaw started to ache. A vibration, low, constant, and electric, was humming through the soles of my boots. I called out. No response. No birds. No wind. Just that hum. I unzipped the first tent. It wasn't empty. There were 2 sleeping bags, and on top of them lay 2 complete hollow shells of human skin. No blood, no struggle, no internal organs. It was as if the people inside had been turned into a liquid and drained out through a single, jagged hole in the heel of the foot. The skin was still warm, and when I touched it, it pulsed. Some things in the wilderness defy the laws of biology. They exist in the corners of our world where the light doesn't reach, and the files are marked inconclusive. I'm your host, Endless, and you're listening to Haunted Hour. If you have an appetite for the unexplained and the truly disturbing, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We gather here every week to pull back the veil. Now, let's go back to the North Basin, because as I stood over those empty husks, I realized the humming wasn't coming from the tents. It was coming from the air itself. I pulled my compass to check my heading. The needle wasn't pointing north. It was spinning vertically, end over end, like a coin on a table. Then I looked at the lake. The water wasn't frozen, but it wasn't liquid either. It looked like static, like a broken television screen, flickering with gray and white noise in the shape of ripples. That's when I saw it. About 50 yards away, a distortion was moving across the clearing. It looked like heat rising off a highway, but it held the shape of a pillar. It was tall, maybe 12 feet, and perfectly silent. Wherever it touched the grass, the blades didn't bend. They turned into a fine gray ash instantly. No fire, no smoke, just erasure. I backed away. My radio crackled, but it wasn't dispatch. It was a sound I can only describe as 1,000 radio stations playing at once for a fraction of a second. A scream made of white noise. I watched as one of the hollow skins inside the tent began to inflate. Not with air. It filled with that same flickering static I saw on the lake. It didn't stand up like a human. It drifted, its empty limbs trailing behind it like a kite with no string. I didn't wait to see if it could see me. I ran. I left my gear. I hiked 10 miles in the dark until I reached my truck. I reported the gas leak the suits told me to report. An hour after my statement, my radio was confiscated. I was met at the trailhead by men in gray parkas who weren't Forest Service. They didn't ask if I was okay. They asked if I had touched the residue. I never went back. But sometimes, when the house is quiet and the TV loses its signal, my jaw starts to ache. And I know that whatever is up in that basin, it's still there. If you saw Pine Ridge in the afternoon, you'd call it a paradise. It's one of those summer campsites that looks like a postcard. Golden sunlight filtering through the canopy, the smell of warm pine needles, and the sound of a nearby creek. But as a ranger, I've learned that beauty is just a mask. When the sun dips behind the ridge, that golden forest turns into a wall of obsidian. It was a Saturday in mid-July. I was doing my rounds when I heard the commotion. A 12-year-old boy named Sam had disappeared. It happened during the campfire. The kids were all huddled together, telling stories and laughing. They'd run out of marshmallows, and Sam volunteered to go back to the tent to grab a fresh bag. The tent was only 30 feet away, but because the stories were so engaging, nobody really tracked the time. It was only after 20 minutes that they realized Sam hadn't come back. They checked the tent. The marshmallows were sitting right there on the floor. But Sam was gone. He had stepped out of the light and simply vanished. We started the search at midnight. Usually you look for footprints or snapped twigs, but the ground was disturbingly clean. As we pushed into the tree line, I felt a pull, a heavy magnetic pressure in my chest. It nudged me toward the gully of thorns, a place so dense even the predators avoid it. But as we moved, we started finding things. A red baseball cap perched on a stump. Further on, a single sneaker tucked into a tree branch 6 feet up. My team wanted to believe it was Sam's, but we couldn't be sure. The gear looked right, but it felt weathered, like it had been sitting in the sun for years, even though Sam had only been gone for hours. We weren't sure if we were following Sam or if we were being led by something else entirely, but that pressure in my chest wouldn't let me turn back. It felt like something invisible was walking 10 feet ahead of us, leading us by the hand. The pull stopped at the mouth of a narrow limestone crevice hidden behind a curtain of ivy. I had to exhale just to squeeze my shoulders through the crack, the rock pressing cold against my back. My team stayed outside while I pushed deeper, sweeping my maglite across the damp walls. The beam cut through the dark, reflecting off wet stone and stagnant puddles. Then, the light hit something white, something porous. I moved the beam slowly. It was a skeleton, small, fragile, and curled into a fetal position in the furthest corner of the crawl space. Tucked into the pocket of a decayed denim jacket was a plastic school ID belonging to Toby, a boy who had vanished from this same campsite 5 years ago. We had searched this exact area back then and found nothing. The moment my light rested on that ID, the freezing air in the cave turned unnaturally warm. The magnetic pressure in my chest vanished. It felt like a long-held breath, finally being released. We brought Toby home. We gave his family the closure they'd waited 5 years for. But we never found Sam. Fire lookout towers aren't built for comfort. They're built for visibility. 12 by 12 foot glass boxes perched on stilts of steel, 80 feet above the tree line. I was at Station 14, 3 days hike from the nearest road. The silence up there is absolute, or at least it's supposed to be. The first time it happened was day 4. It was 1 a.m. I was reading by lamplight when I heard it. Clink. A heavy metallic ring. Clink. Someone was on the ladder. I grabbed my spotlight and ran to the trap door. I leaned over the railing, sweeping the beam down the steel rungs. Nothing. Just the wind whistling through the girders. I told myself it was the metal contracting in the cold, but I knew the sound of a boot on a rung. Day 9, 11:45 p.m. Clink, clink, clink. I didn't even look this time. I sat in my chair with my hatchet in my lap, counting the steps. 5, 6, 7. Then silence. It stayed on the 7th rung for an hour. During the day, everything was normal. The radio worked perfectly. I could check in with the other towers, talk to dispatch, hear the weather reports. But as soon as the sun dipped, the frequency would bleed. Static would swallow the voices. And then, through the white noise, a distorted guttural whisper would cut through. Just 2 words, over and over. It's coming. Day 14, 4 a.m. It reached the 10th rung. I could hear the metal groaning under a weight that was far too heavy for a man. I radioed for an early extraction, but the static was too thick. My words wouldn't leave the tower. Day 17. The moon was full, casting the meadow below in a sickly silver light. The climbing didn't stop at the 7th rung. It didn't stop at the 10th. Clink, clink, clink. I huddled in the corner, my eyes fixed on the trap door. I heard the weight land on the balcony. The wood groaned. I watched through the glass. From behind, it looked like a man, tall, wearing tattered clothes that flapped in the wind. It stood perfectly still, looking out at the horizon. Then, it turned. The moonlight hit its face, and my heart nearly stopped. It had no eyes, just smooth, pale skin stretched over empty sockets. But the mouth was elongated, filled with rows of jagged teeth like a wolf, but far wider, stretching almost to its ears. It began to pace the balcony, its claws clicking against the floorboards. It hadn't noticed me inside the darkened room yet. I didn't think. I knew if it turned its head toward the glass, I was dead. While it was facing the forest, I slid to the trap door. I unlatched it with shaking hands and slipped onto the ladder. I didn't climb. I slid. I moved so fast the metal burned my palms. 20 feet from the ground, my grip failed. I fell hard, a sickening scrack echoing through the trees as my left ankle snapped against a rock. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I dragged myself into the undergrowth, my leg a white-hot pillar of agony. I crawled, then hobbled, using a fallen branch as a crutch, pushing toward the next ridge, toward Station 13. I collapsed into a thicket of ferns miles away and fumbled for my hand radio. My fingers were slick with sweat. I keyed the mic, my voice trembling. "Station 13. This is Station 14. I'm on the ground. I'm injured. Please just come get me." They came for me at dawn. A flight crew found me shivering in the bushes, my ankle purple and swollen to the size of a grapefruit. I told them everything. I told them about the ladder, the radio, and the sightless thing with the wolf's mouth that was standing in my room. They sent a team up to Station 14. They found the door unlocked, but the tower was empty. No footprints, no claw marks, nothing but my own half-eaten dinner sitting on the table. I quit the Forest Service the day I was discharged from the hospital. I moved 3 states away, as far from the mountains as I could get. My supervisor signed the paperwork without looking me in the eye. To them, I was just another ranger who'd had a solitude-induced breakdown. Nobody believed me. But I know what I saw in that moonlight.